Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mrs. Reader's Readers, hanging out with Mrs. Hammond. Today, we're going to continue with our classic novel, Old Yellow by Fred Gibson. The last time we read chapter 6. Today, we're going to read chapter 7. So, let's think about what chapter 6 was about. Remember, there was a man that came to visit Travis and Mother and little Arliss, and his name was Bud Cersei. Bud Cersei. And he was a sloppy old man, and he didn't want to go with the other men when they went on the ride to Kansas. So he stayed back. But what he really does is kind of go around and gossip with all the women and then try to eat and then go home. But anyway, he and his little daughter, who was actually a really cute little girl, and Travis kind of liked her. Her name was Elizabeth. They came to visit and see how they were doing. Well, that Cersei started telling the story about there had been someone or something stealing the meats and maybe some baked goods that some of the other moms had prepared for their family, and they didn't know what it was, and they couldn't find them. Well, in the meantime, Travis, he went down to the creek, and Elizabeth followed, and she told Travis, she says, "I know who's stealing all that meat." And he said, "You do?" And she said, "Yes, and it's your old yellow dog." And Travis was like, "Well, how do you know that?" And she said, "Because I saw it." And so, oh my goodness, Travis was really worried, but she promised not to tell. And there was a reason why she promised not to tell. Do you remember? Her dog was going to have puppies, and Old Yeller was going to be the daddy of those puppies. So she said, "I would never tell." Well, Travis, he didn't want to tell his mom and then he got to worrying about, oh no, I mean, he could get shot or something. And he even told Old Yeller, "You thieving rascal, you're going to get shot." I don't know what he's going to do now, but somehow he's going to have to try to keep Old Yeller home at nighttime, because Old Yeller had been getting really fat and healthy, and they knew that he hadn't been eating at home. So I wonder what they're going to do. So we're going to find out in chapter 7. Is everyone ready? I am. All right, I did a considerably thinking on what Elizabeth Cersei had told me about Old Yeller, and I finally went and told Mama. Why, that old rogue. What is rogue? It's R-O-G-U-E. Rogue means dishonest. So she was calling Old Yeller dishonest. She said, "We'll have to try to figure some way to keep him from prowling. I mean, everybody in the settlement would be mad at us if we don't. Somebody will shoot him," I said. Try tying him up," she said. So I tried tying him up, but we didn't have any baling wire in those days, and he could just chew through anything else before you could turn your back. I tried him with rope and then with big, thick rawhide string. And I cut from a cowhide hanging from the top rail of the fence. Oh, it was the same thing in both cases. By the time that we'd get off to bed, he had done chewed them in two and was gone. "Well, let's try the corn crib," Mama said. And on the third night, well, which was a good idea, that might have worked if it hadn't been for little Arliss. I took Old Yeller out and I put him in this corn crib, and the second that he heard that door shut on him, he set up a yelling and a howling that brought little Arliss on the run. Oh man, little Arliss. Oh, he was mad now. And Mama and I both tried to explain to him why we needed to shut that door up, and little Arliss, he was just too mad to even listen to us. Well, you can explain things very well to somebody who is screaming his head off and chucking you with rocks as fast as he can pick them up. So that didn't work either. Well, it looks like we're stumped, Mama said. I thought for a minute. Well, no, Mama, I believe that we've got one more chance, and that's to shut him up in the same room with me and little Arliss every night. But he'll have to sleep he'll be sleeping in the bed with you boys. And Mama said, and the first thing that you're going to know it, you're going to be both scratching with fleas and having the mange and breaking out with ringworms. "No, I'll put him on a cowhide on the floor and make him sleep there," I said. So Mama agreed, and I spread out a cowhide on the floor beside our bed, and we shut Old Yellow in, and we didn't have one more bit of trouble. Well, of course, Old Yellow, he didn't sleep on the cowhide either. And once, a good while later, I did break out with a little ringworm under my left arm. Oh, but I rubbed it with turpentine just like my mama did, and it soon went away. And so after that, when we fed Old Yellow cornmeal mush or fresh meat, he just ate it and did well on it, and he never one time bothered our chicken's nest. Well, maybe that day too, the varmints got about that time too, the varmints got to pestering us so much that a lot of the times Old Yellow and I, we were kept busy nearly all night long trying to keep the varmints away. Well, it was the coons mainly, because the corn was ripening into roasting ears now, and the coons would come right up at night and strip the shucks back with their little hands and gnaw the milky kernels off of the corn. And also, the watermelons were getting to turn red inside, and the skunks would come in and open up little round holes in the rinds and reach in with their forefeet and drag out the juicy insides to eat them. Well, sometimes the coyotes would come and eat watermelons too, and now and then a deer would jump into the field and eat corn, melons, and peas. Oh, so Old Yellow and I, we took to sleeping in the corn patch every night. Well, we'd sleep on the cowhide that Yellow never would sleep on in the house. That is, we did it when we got to sleep. Most of the nights, we'd just be up fighting coons. We'd sleep out in the middle of the patch where Old Yellow could send a coon clear to the fence on every side. We'd lie there on the cowhide and look up at the stars and listen to the warm night breeze rustling in the corn blades. And sometimes I'd wonder where the stars were and what kept them from hanging up there so high and bright. And if Papa, way off in the yonder in Kansas, could see the same stars I could see. I was getting mighty lonesome to see Papa. With the help of Old Yellow, I was taking care of things all right, but I sure was beginning to wish that he'd come back home. Then I'd think about all the times when I'd get big enough to go off on a cow drive myself and riding my own horse and see all the big new country up the plains and the creeks and the rivers and the mountains and the timbers and the new towns and Indian camps. Then finally, just about that time, I started drifting off to sleep. And I'd hear Old Yellow rise to his feet and go paddling off through the corn, and a minute later, his yelling bay would lift from some part of his corn patch, and I'd hear the fighting squall of some coon caught stealing corn. Then I'd jump to my feet and I'd go turning through the corn, shouting encouraging words to Old Yellow. "Get him, Yeller!" I'd holler. "Tear him up!" Well, and that's what Old Yellow would be trying to do. But a boar coon isn't an easy thing to tear up. I mean, my goodness, for one thing, he'll fight you from sundown till sun up. And he's not big size, but the longer you fight him, the bigger he seems to get. He fights you with all 4 feet and every tooth in his head and enough courage for an animal 5 times his size. On top of that, he's fighting inside a thick hide that fills a dog's mouth like a wad of loose sacking. The dog has a hard time ever really biting him. He just squirms and twists around inside that hide and won't quit fighting even after the dog's got enough and is ready to throw the fight to him. And plenty of times Papa and I'd seen a boar coon whip bail and run him off, then turn on us and chase us clear out of the cornfield. Well, it was easy for me to go running through the dark cornfields yelling for Old Yellow to tear up thieving coons, but it wasn't easy for Old Yellow to do it because he'd be yelling at the coon and he'd be squalling and they'd go wallowing and clawing and thrashing in the corn, puffing the stalks as they broke them off, making such an uproar in the night that it sounded like murder. Well, but then generally when the fight was all over, you see, the coon went one way and Old Yellow, he'd go the other way. And they both of them pretty well satisfied to call it quits. Well, we didn't get much sleep at all at night while this was going on, but we had us a good old time and saved the corn from the coons. Well, the only really bad part of it was the skunks. Well, these skunks, with all that racket we made coon fighting the skunks, they didn't even come often, but when one did come, we were in for a mess. Old Yellow could handle a skunk easy enough. All he had to do was just rush in and grab it by the head and give it a good shake it like that. And that would break that skunk's neck, but it wouldn't end the trouble because not even a hoot owl could kill a skunk without getting sprayed with his scent. Oh, so, I mean, and skunk scent, it is a smell that won't quit. Have you ever smelled a skunk? Probably all of us have. They just like it won't go away. Well, after every skunk killing, old Yellow, he would come and he got so sick that he could hardly stand it. I mean, he'd snort and drool and slobber and vomit. I mean, he'd just roll and wallow in the dirt and go dragging his body through tall weeds trying to get the scent off, but he couldn't. Oh, and then finally he'd give up and he'd come lie down on the cowhide with me, and of course he'd smell so bad that I couldn't stand him and have to go off and try to sleep somewhere else. Then he'd follow me and get his feelings hurt because I wouldn't let him sleep with me. Papa always said that breathing skunk scent was the best way in the world to cure head cold. But that was summertime, and when old Yellow and I didn't have head colds, we sure would just as soon that skunk stayed out of the watermelons and let us alone. Working there at night after night, guarding our precious bread corn from the varmints, I came to see that I would have been up against it if I had not have done without that old help of old Yellow. I don't know what I would have done. By myself, I'd been run to death and still probably wouldn't have saved the corn. Well, and look at all the fun that I would have missed if I'd have been alone, and how lonesome I would have been. Oh, I just had to admit, Papa had been right when he'd told me that all I really needed was a dog. Well, I saw that. I saw that even more clearly when that spotted heifer had her first calf. Well, our milk cows were old-time Longhorn cattle, and they didn't give a lot of milk. And it was really hard to find one that would give much milk more than a calf would take in. But what we generally had to do was milk 5 or 6 cows to get enough milk for just the family. But we had over-crumbled horn cow named Rose that gave a lot of milk. And only she was getting old, and Mama kept hoping that each of her heifer calves would turn out to be as good of milkers as Rose. Mama had tried 2 or 3, but none of them proved to be any good. And then come along the spotted one that was just raw-boned and ugly enough to make a good milk cow. Well, she had the bag for it too, and Mama was certain that this time that she'd give milk cow to replace Rose. She'd be a good one to replace Rose because Rose was getting old. Well, the only trouble was the heifer Spot, as we called her, had been snaky wild from the day she was born. I mean, try to drive her with another cattle and she'd run off and hide. Well, hem her up in the corner and try to get her hands on her, well, she'd turn on you and make fight. Mama had been trying all along to get Spot gentle before she had the first calf, but it was no use. It was no use because Spot didn't want to be friends with anybody. Well, we knew that she was going to give us a pile of trouble when we set out to milk her. Well, I failed to find Spot with the rest of our milk cows one evening when I went to drive them up to the next day, and she was still gone. Well, it's time for her to calf, Mom said, and I'll bet she's got one. And that means she was going to have a baby calf. And so she went out. A lot of times when cows have babies, or when they do have babies, they go out by themselves and hide. So the next morning, I went further back in the hills, and I searched all over, and I finally came across her holed up in a dense thicket of bee myrtle close to a little seep spring, and I got some brief glimpse of a wobbly, long-legged calf before Spot snorted and took after me. She ran me clear to the top of the next high ridge before she turned back. I made another try to go to the edge of the thicket and picked me up some rocks, and I went to hollering and chucking into the brush, trying to scare her and that calf out, and I got her out all right, but she wasn't scared. She came straight for me, and her horns lowered, bawling threats as she came. I had to and I had to turn tail a second time, and again she chased me clear to the top of that ridge. She was trying to protect her baby. I tried it one more time, and then I went to the house and got Old Yellow. I didn't know if he knew anything about driving cattle or not, but I was willing to just bet that he could keep her from chasing me. Well, and he did. Let me tell you, I went up to that edge of that thicket, and I started hollering and chunking rocks into her. And here comes this heifer, madder than ever, it looked like. And I yelled at Old Yellow, "Get her, Yeller!" I hollered, and Yeller got her. Oh, wow. He pulled the nearest trick that I ever saw a dog pull on a cow brute. Only I didn't see it the first time. I was getting away far too fast. I had stumbled and fallen to my knees, and then I turned to run from Spot's charge, and she too was close behind me to be looking back and watching what Old Yellow was doing. Oh, I just heard the scared bawl that she let out, and the crashing on the brush as Old Yellow rolled into her. They were crashing. And I ran a piece further, and then I looked back, and the heifer was scrambling to her feet in a cloud of dust and looking like that she didn't know any more about what had happened than I did. Then she caught sight of Old Yellow. She snorted, stuck her tail in the air, and made for him. And the Yellow ran like he was scared to death, and then cut back around the thicket, and a second later, he was coming in behind Spot. Without making a sound, he ran up beside her, made his leap, and set his teeth in her nose. Oh, I guess it was the weight of him that did it. I just saw him do it lots of times later, but never did quite understand how. Anyhow, he just set his teeth in her nose, doubled himself up in a tight ball, and swung on. He was like swinging on with her nose because he had her nose just chomped on him. But that hurt. That turned that charging heifer a flip. Her heels went straight up in the air over her head, and she landed flat on her back, and all 4 feet were sticking up, and she hit the ground so hard that it sounded like she ought to be bust wide open. Pow! She was up. I guess she felt the way about it too, because anyhow, after taking her second fall, she didn't have much fight left in her, and she just scrambled to her feet and went trotting back into the thicket, lowing to her calf. I followed her with Old Yellow beside me, and we drove her out and across the hills in the cow lot. Oh, man. And not one time did she turn on us again. She did try to run off a couple of times, but all I had to do was send Old Yellow in to head her. And the second she caught sight of him, she couldn't turn fast enough to get headed back in the right direction. Well, it was the same thing when we got her into the cow pen, and her bag was all in the strut with milk that the calves couldn't hold, and Mama said we needed to get that milk out, that she came with a bucket, and I took it knowing that I had me a big old kicking fight on my hands if I ever hoped to get any milk from her. That kicking fight started, and the first time that I touched Spot's bag, she reached out with a flying pine foot, aiming to kick my head off and coming close to doing it. Then she wheeled on me, and she put me on top of the rail fence as quick as a squirrel could have made it. Well, Mama shook her head. I was hoping this wouldn't be the way. She said, I've always hated to have to tie up a heifer to break her for milking, but I guess that's no other way that we're going to have to be able to do that to get milk from this cow. Well, I thought of all the trouble that it would be having to tie that Spot heifer head and feet twice a day, every day, for maybe a month or more. And I looked at Old Yellow standing just outside that pen. Now, what do you think he's going to do? I bet he's going to get Old Yellow to stand guard over her so they can milk her. What do you think? Well, let's see. Yellow, I said, come here. Yellow came bounding through the rails. Mama said, why, son, you can't teach a heifer to stand with a dog in the pen, especially one with a young calf. She'll be fighting at him all the time, thinking that he's a wolf or something trying to get her calf. I laughed. Maybe it won't work, I said, but I bet you one thing, she won't be fighting old Yeller. She didn't either. I mean, she lowered her horns and she rolled her eyes as I thought old Yeller, uh, uh, as I brought old Yeller up to her. Now, Yeller, I said, you stand here and watch her. Well, old Yeller, he seemed to know just what I wanted, because he walked right up to where he could almost touch his nose to hers, and he stood there wagging his stubby tail, and she didn't charge him or run from him, and she didn't want stand there and sort of tremble. Oh, I went back and milked to her. She strutted back, and she didn't even offer me a kick. Not one time, just flinched and drew up a little when I first touched her. Well, that does beat all I have ever seen, Mama said. Why, is that at that rate, we'll have her broke to milk in a week's time. Mama was right, though. Within 3 days after we started, I could drive Spot into that pen, go right up in the milk cart, and all she'd do was just stand there and stare at old Yeller. By the end of the second week, she was standing and belching and chewing her cud, the most gentle cow I had ever milked. After all, I guess you can see why I nearly died when a man rode up one day and claimed old Yeller. So, Travis, he didn't like old Yeller at first, did he? But now, he sees what a wonderful dog old Yeller is, and old Yeller has, saved little Arliss, and he's helped him with many things around the farm, and now he's helped him train the cow to be able to be milked. And then one day, somebody rode up on a horse, and he claimed old Yeller. He said that was his dog. Oh, can you imagine? What can we infer that might happen in chapter 8? Is the man going to take old Yeller away? Oh, this is going to break Travis's heart. Not even talking about little Arliss. So that's the end of chapter 7. We'll be reading chapter 8 soon. I hope all of you have a great evening, and can't wait to see you again. Bye.